type out, when was the last time you budgeted for something, and what was it for? And Kara, I actually can't see the chat when I'm screen sharing. If you can help call out some of the responses, that would be great.
Certainly. I don't see anything in the chat just yet, but I know, oh, someone said save for upgrades and repairs to their house. Still do every week for future expenses. Never actually budgeted, that's why I'm here today. I'll throw one out there, budgeting for orthodontics appointments for our daughter. A recent grad budgeted for transitioning into their apartment from student housing. And someone else, they never really learned how to do budgets. Mm-hmm. Every year for auto and homeowner insurance.
Yep, good. I mean, those are great responses. It sounds like those are priority items, things that we need to save for. But sometimes you can budget for other things too. You can budget for takeout these days, right? With COVID, if maybe on Fridays you get to treat yourself and you don't have to cook just that one day a week, and enjoy things. You can budget for something big, like saving for a down payment for rent, because some these days you need a deposit. I know I had to deposit some funds, usually last month security deposit, as well as down payments for homes. So there could be some bigger ticketed items as well that you can budget for. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So the building blocks of a budget is fairly simple. It's income and expenses, and you're trying to compare it. You want to understand where exactly your money is going or where it's being spent. And once you see where your money is going, hopefully you can make some adjustments to meet your needs, your obligations, your priorities. So income is the money you receive. Some people use the fancy word of revenue, and you'll see it on the budget sheet that it's also referred to as revenue, but it's an income stream. And then expenses is how you use your income. And really it's about, how to balance your income and expenses so that hopefully you don't get in the negative. But even better, if you can have some leftover, for other things, other needs or wants. So this is a quick sample of a budgeting worksheet that we've been sharing with different audiences who've been attending our sessions. And this is a simplified version. There could be more lines to the income. For example, with income, you put down how much you make. This is typically done on a monthly basis. So the date at the top could be, March. We're in March now. The revenues, you list, okay, what is your income from work? And what you want to list is your net income versus your gross income. I hope everybody knows the difference. The net income is minus all the taxes that you have to pay, into the government and Medicare and Social Security, et cetera. And so it's the net income is the amount that you bring home. You can have other sources of income too. It could be, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. It could be a dividend, from some stock holdings. It could be a part-time job. It could be an additional gig, if you're doing a freelancing or something like that. Once you list your income, you want to list the amount and then add it up. And then expenses, you want to cover things like the shelter piece. And for some of you who are a little bit more detail oriented, what you can do is, instead of just listing it as shelter, you can break it down even further. So is it rent or is it mortgage? Utilities, insurance, security, repairs. And sometimes, if you're of a personality who really wants to know more of the details, you want to list them out individually, because then you can compare month by month, to see if, hey, why am I spending so much on utilities this month? Is there an opportunity for me to save, to conserve some energy around the house, so I can save a little bit more money? So that would be one of the benefits of dividing these further into separate categories under expenses. Transportation, the same thing. If you have leases, if you own a car, you want to include insurance costs as well, because on a monthly basis, is that being deducted, or you have to pay it yourself? Either way, listing those would be helpful. Telecommunications, phone, cable, internet. With me, I decided to just get rid of cable completely, because I think it's a waste. It's mostly commercials, and our family's been without cable for 15 years, and that's a lot of money saved, because cable is very expensive. And now, with streaming, all I really have that I pay for streaming is Netflix. And, we enjoy that. We could find all sorts of shows, and it's commercial free. So it's really good. And when it's commercial free, it's unfortunately my kids are on YouTube, and so they see these ads too, but at least it's one less headache when they're not watching something on cable, and they're like, Mama, can I get that? It looks really cool. I'm like, no. Sorry. So now I get really stressed out when I see like commercials, when we're staying at a hotel or something on cable, and the kids are just nagging me about some of the products that are being sold, and they want it. There's, children, expenses related to children, food, monthly debt payments are expenses, obviously, if you have student or car loans. Monthly savings commitments. So if you're, investing or contributing to retirement, or you're putting some money away towards college education for your kids, et cetera, you want to list those as well. And hopefully, you'll be able to put a little bit into kind of that bucket every month, so that way it can carry over, and add value and increase in value. And if you just don't know, how much you're spending, you can put zero, or if you're not spending, obviously, on any of those items, you could put zero. What other expenses do you think can be added to a budgeting sheet? Or, if you do a budget, what other expenses do you use?
And while people are coming up with that in the chat, someone says they have vet bills. Sue was actually wondering if we could share this template with anybody who is interested in having like a template to use for budgeting.
Yeah, I do have a Word document that's a template. I mean, it's mostly for show, but I would recommend that you use Excel, because it's easier to track. And I noted, on the bottom there, you can save the full document by year, and you just add tabs at the bottom for each month. And the calculations are going to be automatic, if you use certain formulas to just do simple add function and subtract function. And so that's what I would recommend. I mean, I can certainly, I don't know how I can share it, I guess, with our hosts, and then they can, figure out a way of sending it to participants.
Yes, Sue says she would love to have that Word document if we can.
Okay.
And
what I can do is, if you send it to me, then I can send it to everybody who's registered.
Okay, yeah, that's easy, because we have that already.
And also feel free to take screenshots of the presentation slides.
Yes.
Yes, someone said they're Excel challenged. So we can also add the file in the chat if we're able to. So I know someone said they answered that they have vet bills that they budget for as other expenses. Another person said they budget for donations that they like to make to charity.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to chime in with what they budget for? I like that you have coffee on there. with the remote learning, one of my kids' teachers said that her daughter has Starbucks every day as motivation for her to like log in and do her work. That can add up.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean,
Spoiled.
one of the keys of saving is getting rid of some of those coffee expenses. On a monthly basis, you can save like hundreds of dollars, especially at Starbucks.
Yes. Someone else said travel.
Mhm. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Those are great additions.
And leisure activities,
Leisure.
hiking.
I wanted to just share this screen. This is from a site that I found, thebalance.com, trying to see what some of the best budgeting apps, because I feel like in this virtual world, and we've been like this a few years, but since apps started, a lot of people are using them for many different reasons. And there are budgeting apps out there as well. According to this website, the best overall one is mint.com, which is actually one that I've used in the past. And I think since I've changed phones a few times, it kind of messed up the flow there a little bit. But here are some other ones that you can use. And really, it's just do a quick Google search, and these will come up, and the websites will show up too. So you can just click on the links, and it'll take you to these sites. Has anybody used any of these budgeting apps before and wanted to share their experience? Chris?
Let me jump in. One of the reasons I'm taking this class is I am so friggin' anal. I am the master of the Excel spreadsheet that you talked about. I break everything down into every little component, and month by month, day by day, I track every expense.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really a good habit to have, Tom.
Talk to my wife about that. The opposite now, and I make this quick transition, then come back to what your slide says. The opposite now is that because everything is online and things that we buy are through Amazon, you don't have the same receipt that you used to get when you went to Lowe's and you knew that you'd bought some shingles or something. It's now very generic. And the reason I introduced those words before mentioning all these apps, I've noticed that, and one of the reasons I'm taking this class is to help teach my 3 kids. They're adults. I'm not sure they want to be taught, but that's a separate issue. Is all of these things are generic. They often roll up things. So for example, when you buy something, it automatically goes onto a budget, and you get a generic thing. You don't get that anal thing. And so I just make that point about some of these things that look like they're going to do what they're supposed to do, but I think they're just too broad from my perspective.
Yep, correct. And I would encourage the Excel spreadsheet because you have a lot more control too over it. But you're right. I mean, like, for example, with mint.com, they just lump everything together, into transportation, into medical, into groceries. And so yeah, you're very right. If you're more of a kind who, wants to be more detailed, keep a detailed record, then you definitely, utilizing some of these apps may not be the best for you. Kara, I see, I don't know if you had anything to add or share.
I do. Basically, some people have said that they do use Mint, but they weren't able to put all of the expenses in. So it's not that helpful, I guess, if you don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else mentioned that they haven't mastered the action and consistency in tracking things. So that's where it becomes key, right? You can have all the tools, but you have to be consistent and follow through.
Yep, correct. Great. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think, I mean, not to put anyone down, but some of these budgeting apps, I think like Tom says too, is a little bit for kind of the lazy person, who just wants everything to go to some source that can, hopefully add everything up for you. But, they won't be as detailed, as you'd like it to be. And so you just have to be careful with that. So some monthly ideas, you want to make sure that you're conducting a monthly review, for some people, if it helps, a weekly review, or even a daily review, like Tom mentioned, if you want to, if you really want to pay attention to how you're spending. To me, I like kind of, I'm a little bit more laid back as it comes to review. So I would go with the monthly route. But I check my balance every single day in my banking account, because I don't want my bank account to go negative, because, in my head, I do know that some of expenses are going to be coming, tomorrow, or, there's certain cycles that come up. And so I always want to make sure that that my bank balance is not a negative. You want to plan ahead, have a monthly goal setting session. So when you're reviewing these, whether it's by yourself or with your family or domestic partner, whoever, you want to sit down and say, hey, these are the expenses that we have had for the past month. This month, can we maybe have a goal of saving this much money so we can do this, or, buy this. One of the big ticket items that is coming up for my family is we have to replace our furnace. And replacing a furnace, is important. Obviously, we were actually without heat for a few days because our furnace wasn't working properly. It probably has never been replaced since we bought it. So it's probably, over 50 years old. I don't know, but that's something that we have to, save for, and we want to make sure that we have enough money, to cover that over the next few months. Celebrating successes, hopefully that's a way of getting people that consistency. Hey, by the end of the month, we're able to save this. So let's celebrate, whether it's, I don't know, a glass of wine or whatever, celebrate yourself too. Does anybody have any other thoughts or questions on this slide?
I know I saw David Foreman just joined in with the chat, and he said something useful. He said, like Tammy, he loves Excel. He keeps track of family debts, such as credit card loans, and it motivates him to see the amount of debt decreasing, so he can look back and see the progress that's been made.
Yep. It sounds like Excel wins out for budgeting. So increasing income, can help you cover some expenses that you may have for the month. Hopefully save and share. And these are some ways that you can increase income. You can do something once, selling something that you may not need anymore. I'm pretty bad in terms of trying to hoard things. I don't know if some of you are like that, but I place some sentimental value around a lot of gifts we get, for example, and I feel bad if I were to get rid of it. But if I no longer need it or use it, then I think I've learned to change my mentality, meaning that, hey, maybe someone else can put a better use to this, and it will help them, versus keeping it for myself. So if you find, that there's something that you can sell to increase your income, that's great. Occasionally, before we only had garage sales and yard sales listed here, but I know that online marketplaces have been very popular now, and people have been posting, just for example, if you have children grow, outgrow their clothes so quickly. If they're in great shape, you can try to list them. And Furniture, if you have an excess, like I do. At one time, I had an excess of tables, like nightstands. I don't know why I kept collecting them, but I did. But the thing with me was, in the past, I'm the worst salesperson. Like, I cannot sell anything, even for free. It's like so hard to like, hey, take this. So when I was living in Lowell, I actually did something called free. It was like a free yard sale type of thing. So I just put everything on the driveway. I mean, and even like my baby, some of the baby furniture and toys and stuff that we had. I'm like, just come and get it, because I don't know how to sell things. But my sister lives with me, and she's starting to list some of those things that I normally like wouldn't, and she's making some money. I'm like, okay, that's great. You can find some good deals too in the online marketplaces. So just an FYI, instead of buying things brand new. Ongoing could be a part-time second job of some sort. Overtime, if you have that ability, to get overtime, that could be helpful for increasing income. And then finding ways to develop your career, so that you can increase your income in the future. That would be considered something as a long-term, goal. Decreasing expenses, you want to determine what your needs, wants, and obligations are. I hope everybody knows the difference between those. Sometimes we are very tempted to get things that we want, but we may not necessarily need. Sometimes, when we just buy things out of the want, category, we may not be able to meet our obligations. And so we just have to be, really careful in that. And I would suggest, when you're doing your budget, if you're doing something for, let's say, March, I would say even start a template for the following month, April, and seeing, looking ahead, forecasting what some of the bigger expenses that you may want to put down that you have to be mindful for, because then out of this month's, budget, I can save, towards that big expense. So sometimes it's better to write it on, paper or an Excel spreadsheet. When you see it, you're more apt to go for it or accomplish that goal of, trying to meet the cost of what that expense could be. Some ways to decrease expenses, you can conserve. What can you get cheaper or use less of? So earlier I mentioned, utilities is a huge thing. As the spring is coming, summer is coming, try to be mindful of, just an example, AC usage. We at the house, we barely use air conditioner. We typically use a fan if possible. And, even so we don't spend so much money, on AC. And unfortunately, our electricity, for whatever reason, where we live, the power breaks down, like the power goes out like so often. And I live in South Chelmsford currently, and we would see like our neighborhood, why is this happening? So we're not sure if it's related to just, power lines down, but it could be also related to other, people using too much energy. And so just trying to be mindful of that. But when you use less energy, you can also save a lot of money. Adjust. What can you renegotiate is another thing. So as an example, phone service. I mean, a lot of us can't live without cell phones. But, once you pass the usually 2-year contract, the price of the phone service goes up like so much, and sometimes people could get blindsided by it because, you're not keeping track of, oh gosh, that was 2 years ago, so it's going to come up now. But when that does happen, you can actually, call the company, and renegotiate. I mean, you've been a long, loyal customer. Please, what can you do for me? There, because there are many other options out there, and I think companies tend to want to keep their customers. So they would help with some of those expenses if it's going to be too much. What can you do without? What can you eliminate? So those are things that you can possibly get rid of if you can live without them. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments about this section for decreasing expenses.
There was a comment, excuse me. Someone mentioned that they tend to run up their electric in the cold months to supplement oil heat, and it can bring sticker shock bills in December through February. Last year, they decided to overpay Eversource with a fixed monthly amount and paid ahead so that they still owe, that Eversource actually still owes them money despite their heater going almost every day. So that's a form of budgeting for sure. Someone else mentioned that they use smart bulbs and have the ability to dim them with the phone app. That saves electricity, not to mention they can turn lights off with the phone that their 12-year-old always leaves on.
The other thing is, if you have surge protectors for like your electronics, I mean, we're all surrounded by electronics these days. If you're not using, let's say your computer, your lamp is all plugged into one, you can just switch to the off button, on that surge protector, and it will help conserve energy, because then there's no leaking electricity, that's going to contribute to the cost. So, and I know we have electricity plugs everywhere, and like most of our outlets are connected, to something, and so just trying to be really mindful of that. Good.
And also a reminder that coffee and eating out is something that's within our control. Someone pointed out in the chat.
Yes, it definitely is. My kids, they are 5 years old and 9 years old, and they're always like, hey, can we have a burger today? And, can we get it from this and that? And, can we have fries? And, once in a while, I'll be like, okay, yeah, that's okay. If I'm too lazy, to cook or whatever, we'll just go. But it's just as good, even better, if you just buy burgers from, the stores, Market Basket or wherever, and just make it yourselves. And, and it generally tastes better than the other burgers, in my opinion. And you can control, what you can put in there and the size and everything too, even, if you want to make it out of ground meat. So those are, just some things that we think about. My kids love sushi, like they can't live without sushi. And they want us to have sushi every Saturday. Sushi is very expensive if you don't know. And so the work around it is we would actually go to H Mart, or Wegmans actually now has it. It's sushi quality salmon. Until we just get, that's the most expense. And then, we buy seaweed separately, and we buy, avocado, and that's really all they want: salmon, avocado, sushi. And we always have rice at home, so that's not a problem. And they just roll it up themselves, and it saves so much money. And they can, because between the two of them, they can like finish, like at least a tray each from a restaurant, or, from even Market Basket, or Hannaford's have them too. But making them, it gives you like this satisfactory feeling that you made your own food, especially for the kids. And at the same time, we're saving a lot of money, trust me.
Here's the thought, if I might add. Just like when we first started, we were talking about the backup and ordering things from for home construction projects. As soon as most of us are vaccinated, and while still wearing masks and being socially distant, a lot of folks are going to begin going out on a much more regular basis than they ever have. And I think it'll be even beyond what you might have gotten in takeout. And I know for Sandy and I, we have a pent up desire to do that. And I think that for some folks, that's going to catch them by surprise, because when they start going out, even at $50, $75 a night, that may not have been in their budget.
Mhm.
Sandy's been cooking a lot of wonderful meals at home, and it's much more inexpensive than going out. So just a thought to share for other people to give some thought to.
Yes, no, it's very true. You know, we also kind of have this, I don't know if obligation is the word, but we also want to support our local businesses, you know, as well. So, you know, we kind of have to weigh the feeling of guilt versus kind of like helping and supporting them, you know. And I think the point is, you know, if we do want to support them, you want to make sure that we're saving, you know, for that expense. So let's say, hey, you know, let's decide to go to this restaurant, you know, next week, something like that, or once a week. You know, let's plan to either do takeout or go to a restaurant to eat. But let's plan for it. And I think that's where, you know, we really just need to be mindful of, because you're right. Once people start going out and spending, you know, so much money, they're, you know, the budget's probably going to be negative more often than not. So the key takeaway here is, you know, try to use a monthly spending and saving plan, also known as a budget, you know, to guide how you use your money. And then, so sometimes even with careful planning, money can run short. What can you do? Any suggestions? You could type in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak.
Well, I know in the past when we talked about money habitudes last week, someone, I think it was David, who mentioned importance of having maybe credit, emergency credit on hand for the times when things run short.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And even earlier in this conversation, Sophie, you mentioned sometimes looking around and seeing what you could do to sell something that you might not need.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else in the chat just said that they were also going to say having emergency fund, emergency savings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That you don't touch, knowing that that is just strictly for emergencies only.
Yep. How many months of an emergency fund do you think we need in order to stay afloat or survive, whichever term you prefer? Any thoughts there? What is the recommended number of months?
Christina guessed 6 months in the chat. David Foreman also says 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I've been able to save 3 months, someone else mentions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the past, you know, the recommendation was 3 months worth, but nowadays it's at least 6 to 8 months. And the reason is because things are changing so rapidly, you know, that we want to be sure that we have enough, you know, for things that could happen in the near future. Obviously, it's very hard to save that much money all at once, but hopefully by, you know, doing some of this budgeting, you're putting some money aside towards the emergency fund that can then build up. Because if you think about it, you know, let's say your average monthly expense totals up to $2,000. You know, that includes the rent, that includes, you know, mortgage if you have a house, all the insurances, all the utilities, all the phone bills, etc. Never mind the groceries, you know, that can be up and down a little bit, electricity. So it could be a lot more, obviously, than $2,000. I know mine is, so I don't feel good about it. But but to save 6 months worth, I mean, just multiply it. I mean, that's a lot of money, you know, to have to save, but you have to work towards it, you know, and don't beat yourself up if you can't do it all at once. You can do it incrementally. And I think as long as you're trying to be mindful of cutting things out that you not necessarily need or don't need to do, that would be great. You know, one of the habitudes from last week's session talked about spontaneous spending and carefree spending, you know, and but also status, that status piece where, you know, you always want to pay for your friends. I'm like, why are you paying for your friends, you know, all the time? Like, that doesn't make sense. I get mad at my husband all the time. Like, we don't have that type of money, you know, why do you do it? And, you know, he's like, well, he feels bad because, you know, they're not really working or whatever. And I'm like, well, just invite them to the house for a meal then, you know. So it happens, you know, to me a lot too, but as much as you can cut, you know, some things that that you don't necessarily need, or you know, one of the things that I keep saying to some students that were doing similar presentations to is, your goal is to be in as little debt as possible. That's the goal of financial wellness, you know. And once you get to a point where you don't have, you know, any debt at all, I mean, that's obviously, you know, the goal of all this planning and stuff. But once you get there, you know, it feels so much better about doing that, you know, spending on that extra whatever. So I just wanted to share that.
A couple good points from the chat. Someone mentioned that going through this time during COVID has really opened their eyes. And both Tammy and David had some good point about setting up direct deposit to savings, like a percentage of your paycheck just automatically being set aside for savings, which you can work with your payroll at your company to do usually. And I agree, that way you don't even miss it if it's within your budget, to just have that. It could be a small amount, even like, you know, $20, $25 a month even, but that adds up, you know, if you're doing it per paycheck actually. So yeah, that's an easy way to do it without having to like think about it too hard.
Yeah, and I do that too, you know. And there's no general rule of thumb. There's no set amount that you need to put in. It's really what you're comfortable for. What I do is I put in like 70% will go into my checking account for all my expenses, and then 30% will automatically go to my savings. Not that I've never transferred from my savings to cover my expenses in my checking account, but at least, like Kara said, you know, it's money that we're not seeing, but that's being saved for you. Good. So what can you do? You know, again, increase the income, decrease expenses, contact your creditors. You know, sometimes you may be running into a situation where you can't, you know, keep up with some of your payments. You know, contact them and let them know your situation, you know, and usually they want to, you know, they can work something with you, whether or not it's, you know, trying to decrease your monthly payment or whatever, or deferring it if you're not working currently. They tend, you know, to do that because they want to still get your money, but obviously if you don't have any income, you know, coming in at that point, where are you going to get it from? So try to talk. It never hurts to ask for help. So that's, I think, the other point too. Prioritize what to pay first. So prioritizing based on what might happen, try to make choices about which bills to pay in full. You know, there could be some bills that you want to pay in full because the interest rate is just sky high, that it's not worth, you know, paying it just partially. So, you know, be careful of that. And then paying partially, you know, if, for example, you know, if you if you have 3 credit cards, right? And we cover this in another session, but if you have 3 credit cards, you know, the first credit card is 25% interest rate. You definitely want to pay that in full, you know, if after you've spent it. If the interest rate of the second card is, let's say 10%, you know, it's not as much, but it's still a lot. You still want to pay. And then, you know, are there ones that you can pay late that you won't get any penalties? Sometimes medical bills, you can pay late and they won't give you like a, you know, a penalty for that. And so just make sure you understand, you know, what your different bills are, what the different payment options are, what the interest rates are, what the late payments are, fees are for each of those things. And you can, you know, decide what you can prioritize better.
Carol made a good point in the chat. She said when she had teenagers, she used to put away $10 each month automatically into separate savings account. And then when they had an unexpected expense for school or prom duds or driver's insurance or sports equipment, she had a little pile of money saved up. And that was almost 10 years ago, and still put that $20 a week away, and now tap that for Christmas, or just send them a little cash for no reason, just to brighten their day. That's so nice.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And so one other tip, it says, we always try to do the no interest for 1 year on purchases at places like Home Depot or Best Buy.
Yep. With that, you want to be careful also. Don't over commit to those credit cards, you know, because your credit report is going to be affected as well, your credit scores, if you have too many of these revolving credits. So again, everything in moderation, right? You want to pay attention to consequences that prevent you from earning income. So, you know, if it's an expense that is affecting your transportation, for example, that's something that you can't cut out, you know, because you need that for work or access to phone or internet. You don't want to jeopardize your shelter or other basic needs, impact health or ability to live independently. You want to make sure that you're not getting into a situation where you're doing something that could increase your debt, and then could also result in a loss of your assets. So some key takeaways, you know, prioritize which bills to pay first when money is short, and then responsibilities should be prioritized over discretionary expenses. So this is kind of the ending part of this session. Good news, you have extra money. What can you do with it? Can you type in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourselves, share with us what would you do if you had extra money this month?
I see David already said that those 0% intro cards can be good to pay off higher debt. He determined how much he can afford to pay monthly and multiply into even payments for the duration of the promotion rate. And it's important to make sure you pay in full by the end of the promotional rate to avoid finance charges. And so David, again, he's our branch service manager with our Hudson team. That's such good advice that he just gave there. Let's see. So Tammy says she tries to save it. Let's see, someone else, make more payments on the mortgage, save it. If they had extra money, they deposit into a rainy day account. Those are the general comments from the chat.
Yep, good, great. So celebrate, treat yourself if you can. Put it towards your savings or emergency fund that we talked about. Pay down debt that some of you had mentioned, and add it to your financial goal. If you're planning a vacation, you know, you need a better car, better operating car, renovations, etc. Put aside for special occasions and holidays. You know, as we were preparing this, I was preparing it with a couple of other team members, and you know, we often don't think about the cost of even just attending a wedding, never mind the wedding gift, you know, and so put it aside if you can for those anticipated special occasions, birthdays, births. Add to your retirement or you know, investment account that you know, that could help you, in the future, and then carry over the income, to the next month. Any others, Kara, that folks may have?
No, I don't see any others, but I think that's all good advice. And I know I was always raised that you need to have something set aside, that just forget about it once you've got a little bit set aside, because you never know when you might need it. It's really tempting to tap into savings and anything you set aside. So you have to be disciplined, but yeah.
Yeah, I and my experience is, it is very hard for me to not tap into my savings because it's so accessible, because when you log online, right, you can see what you have, both savings and checking. You can do immediate transfers between accounts, if you need it. But if you put money towards, let's say, an investment account, you're not going to see that. And for me, I don't want to go through like the hurdle of trying to get money from the investment account to cover, some unexpected expense. And so putting it, in something that you can't touch, as easily as like a savings account could definitely help you with saving.
Yeah, I know sometimes it's old fashioned, but people do certificate of deposit type things, or there's different ways you can put money away that will kind of give you incentive not to touch it sooner, because you might pay a penalty.
Yep.
And then someone else put that they think about 50 years from now, the father gave them a chunk of money long ago when the interest rate was 18%. Just think if we had kept that instead of spending it. Yeah, because the interest rates are not that anymore these days.
Yep, they're like 0.001%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very sad. So that's all. Any questions or comments? I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see how I can do that.
Is there a way you can put that document in the chat for anybody, or? Okay.
Well, it's a file. I don't know if I can do that, but
Okay.
I'll email it to Christina.
Okay.
That's email to me.
All right. Hold on. Stop share. Okay, good. All right. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts?
I really like the Excel spreadsheet, tracking it on that, because actually I've been trying to download a couple different apps, and I don't even get to them because there's so much to fill out and kind of abandoned it. So I think I really like the idea of just putting it in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Christina, I'll send you a copy of all the items on my spreadsheet, and you'll both be humored, and maybe you'll draw from it yourself.
Right.
And I saw that Carol was not an Excel spreadsheet person, and that's an interesting comment, because we now have moved into a point where everyone assumes that everyone knows everything. That little thing up in the right-hand corner, the 3 dots. Don't you know what that means next to the triangle? Huh? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, my issue with the Excel is I've never been like taught, so I'm self-taught, and I feel like I do everything the hard way, and there's probably 10,000 easier ways to do it. I know how to use functions, but in logically setting it up, I set it up and then I realize it's all wrong, and I don't have enough columns in the top, and then I just get flustered. But I'm going to work on it. I'm not giving up.
A plug and play template would help you, because then you don't have to really do much.
Yeah.
Well, I think
This was
Tom can help.
excellent.
And you can also Google the templates that are out there. You can just type budgeting Excel template, and there's so many resources out there readily available for us to use for free. So you can do that, and some of those templates have the formulas already built in. So you just plug in your number and it adds everything up at the end for you.
That's great. Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. That was really great. Next week is our final workshop and it's going to be on debt management. Is that right, Kira?
Yes,
Yes.
and I'll be helping to lead that discussion.
Great. Yeah. So next Wednesday, same time. And thank you again. See you
All
next
right,
week.
thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.